Call the meeting to order. Call the roll.
Trustee Healy?
Here.
Trustee Katsinas?
Here.
Trustee Milani?
Here.
Trustee Compass?
Here.
Trustee Reardon?
Here.
Trustee Rashevsky?
Here.
Mayor Pika?
Here.
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the June 17th, 2024 Committee of the Whole minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole of June 17th, 2024.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Rashevsky?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Milani?
Aye.
Trustee Compass?
Aye.
Trustee Reardon?
Aye.
Mayor Pika?
Aye.
Non-scheduled citizens and visitors for agenda-specific public comment.
Anybody here? Okay.
Emergency storm sewer repair at Franklin Lieu Center.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Reardon.
move to recommend to the village board to approve authorizing payment to Aries Inc. of Joliet, Illinois for the emergency storm sewer repair at the Franklin Loebe Center in the amount of $282,630.
Second.
And this was an emergency repair that we had at the, between the two ponds at the Loebe Center. So obviously needed to get done. Any comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Reardon?
Aye.
Trustee Milani?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Compass?
Aye.
Trustee Rashevsky?
Aye.
Mayor Pika?
Aye.
Substantive amendment, revise and update development and subdivision Exactions, dedication of land and fees in lieu of dedication.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Rashevsky.
I move to recommend to the village board to approve the Plan Commission recommended action regarding case number 2023-0915 as presented in the staff report.
Second.
Want to give us a quick, little brief review? Yeah. Emphasize the word brief.
Just a little refresher, in terms of impact fees, it's not to create a revenue stream for your taxing body, tax and compensation, or to provide cash
Helps if you turn. Okay, the purpose of impact fees is to not be a revenue stream for the different taxing bodies, but to mitigate the financial impact of new residents into community. We are kind of in our mid-development phase. We're mostly developed, but we still have undeveloped land, so impact fees are still necessary for us to continue. We haven't updated our impact fee ordinance since 1994. So that's what this is an attempt to do, to update the language up to current case law and also to update the amounts. So for this revision, the categories that we're dealing with here are schools, parks, libraries, recreational facilities, open space, law enforcement, fire, emergency responses, and village public infrastructure. The last three of those are new. Is that correct? Right. So the last three of those are new impact fees to deal with those individual individual services. Another new aspect of this is that we need to enter into intergovernmental agreement with all non-village entities. The main reason for this is that we collect the fees on behalf of others. And Mike Roth is our attorney. He can talk to you more about this specific. There we go.
So, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. My name is Michael Roth. I'm an attorney with Ice Miller. So, just to recap, it's land cash donations in the case of schools and parks. For everybody else, it's impact fees. It's cash only. It's going to be cash on a per permit basis, which is going to make the administration much easier. It is important, in my opinion, that you have an intergovernmental agreement. I think you know as well as anyone that there can be disagreements between the beneficiaries of your ordinance and the village board in its wisdom, and there has to be balance. So we put in the ordinance that anybody that wants to take advantage of the land cash donations or the impact fees needs to sign an intergovernmental agreement with the village that says we agree to this. And in return, they're going to get impact fees and they're going to get land cash donated. In my opinion, it is much safer, it's much easier from a legal perspective when you have an agreement rather than trying to do code enforcement, especially from a subdivision or zoning code. You should have their consent to do this. And also one of the important parts of the intergovernmental agreement is that the school in particular, they need to update their statistics, what the needs are that are being generated, what their student population is. As you know, there's been controversy in that regard, and part of it is because they never updated them. They need to be updated. The community, the demographics of the community change over time, and they have here in Orland Park. And so it's important that they be responsible too and update their needs assessment every 5 years. So that's the main reasons for the
So
intergovernmental
things like
agreement.
their student population is down 10%, but yet they're putting $17 million of capital to expand their schools. Those types of things are important from a legal perspective.
I think they are, yes.
Okay, good. We do too.
And then for the needs assessment, and this is for the impact fee part, right? So for impact fees, it's not just we're just going to give you this money. It's going to be based off of what your actual capital costs are. So if we're going to be doing capital improvements, they need to be tied to actual capital expenses. All right, go ahead. So for schools, the information is based, we have to predict, obviously, because the people aren't there yet, how many students are going to be generated by different housing types. And this is through a series of tables, and this is the information that Mike was talking about that we need to make sure that we keep current. Also, the cost per acre that's currently in our ordinance is old. It's like $90,000 per acre, and the current land value is $300,000 per acre. So we have to make sure that if they do need to purchase land, that they have the proper amount of money to do so. Same thing with parks. So this is based off of how much land we need per 1,000 people. Again, we're updating the different types of parks and the sizes for different types of parks, and then the population. So the first one is based off of children we expect to be produced by units of different sizes, or number of bedrooms, and for buildings where we're going to be doing a bunch at one time, for what is the mix of units in that structure, and then also the size requirements for those parks. And then the cash in lieu payments. So this is a major change from what we originally took to the Plan Commission. After the Plan Commission passed it, we reviewed it, and there was an option for them to pay their impact fees up front. We decided for efficiency purposes, this is very difficult for us to administer, that if we don't know that the development is ever going to get completed, if they put money up front, then we have to subtract out based off of maybe their units numbers change depending on what different demands for different building types are throughout the course of the development. So we're going to be making sure that we collect them at the time of permit, and not be holding money and us having to be responsible for keeping track of large down payments. So it's a pay as you go. And that's going to ease up a lot of time on staff to keep track of these. Right. And then those are just other, so the fire district is now also going to be in this plan, so they will be providing the same information on their capital costs. There's one for capital costs for the police department, other law enforcement activities. There already is one for the library, so we're just updating it. And then we've got other public infrastructure. Then that would be our money going into our account. Okay, there are some people that are exempt, or some developments that are exempt, and that's generally because they are likely to have less use for something. So assisted living developments and age-restricted development, that basically means senior developments, they would be waiving certain fees, not impacted by the impacts. And actually, we don't need, this is the Plan Commission conversation. So Carrie, do you want to take over this part of it?
Yeah, so listed in order of conversation. So they just wanted to clarify that it was 300,000 per acre, because it just listed the 300,000. The park ratios, the 7 acres per 1,000 population is based on, will be part of the impact fee calculation. Our comprehensive plan does have a recommendation of 10 acres per 1,000 population. And then extensive discussion was around the removal of the transportation exaction fees and concerns related to that, maintaining roads, expanding roads, that sort of thing. But just knowing that there's a lot that goes behind, preparing and staying up to date, and that it would be in our best interest to transition out of the transportation fees and do something more along the lines of the village public infrastructure fee.
Why are we basing this on 7 acres if the comprehensive plan calls for 10 acres?
Okay. I believe it's based on what other communities are calculating their fees at, is at a rate of 7 acres per 1,000 population.
Okay.
So afterwards, we went through all the comments of the commission. We did another go around about making sure how we might actually implement this, and that's why we made the changes that you've got in front of you right now. Especially the not having the option to pay it all up front is a pretty substantive change. So what we're recommending at this point is to send it back to the Plan Commission after a 30-day period for public comment from taxing bodies, have them relook at it, and then send it back forward and then implement it. Then there would be 90 days then for the outside or non-Orland Park agencies or governmental bodies to enter into the IGA. And then we would recommend after that time that we would flip the switch on and start collecting.
So
the
you're
fees.
recommending that we send it back to the Plan Commission?
Right, just
Not
because
that we're approving their recommended action?
so our recommended action is to send it back to the Plan Commission based off of this timeline to give the other taxing bodies additional time to review and for them to review something that was a little bit
All right,
different.
so you've made changes from what the Planning Commission
Yes.
had here?
We've made what we feel to be improvements based off of their input, and then making sure that when we implement this, that we're able to do that. This is also part of the Tyler process and making sure that we're able to do that. Oh, one other thing on this. No, that's it. Wrong case. I'll come for that other thing later, yeah.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, the thought on that, and it's your call, obviously, but the thought on that is that we haven't gotten the response from the school district, thought we'd do that, or it went back.
I'm
to the
okay with
Plan
it. I just, it's, it's on the agenda as that we're approving their plan and moving it forward. So it would have been better to have it on the agenda as, what you wanted us to do. But that's fine. I'll entertain a motion. Well, first off, I'll open it up to any questions. And just so you know, just so I can explain it with the upfront versus the pay-as-you-go. If it's upfront, it takes them 8 years or whatever to build out the subdivision. Every time that they pull a permit, they have to go back and calculate it. They have to subtract it from what they owed.
Correct.
It's really complicated. So rather than we have to keep the financial accounts and all that, rather than do that, it's just, hey, every time there's a permit, we're going to pull it. I think that makes a lot more sense. Plus, the burden is not on the developer to put all that money up front. So I think that's also good. But what other questions do you have before I entertain a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I have two questions. We waited 30 years to do this now. Do we have something in here that's going to do this a little more often and, analyze this in terms of, how much we're charging, what we should be charging a little more often than 30 years?
There isn't an automatic obligation to do that in what we have presented.
Well, there's two things that are built into the ordinance. One, again, is the school districts have to do their demographic studies.
Well,
And the other thing is that any cash that's being held that hasn't been spent has to be reimbursed. And so it should true up somewhat, over a period of about 5 years. But of course, it's always smart to take another look, see how things are going. See what your build-out status is, because if the village is completely built out, do you have an administrative system that doesn't really do much? Again, you just keep in mind that these revisions, these are fees and exactions that are based upon residential development only.
So the IGAs, the plan for the IGAs is to be how long? 5 years?
Well, there's a requirement under the IGA. The IGA isn't limited to 5 years. They can renew.
What is our plan? What is our plan for the IGAs? What is our proposed IGAs? Are they 5 years?
They're automatically renew every year. And if anybody wants to call it quits on the IGA, they can, and that'll be the end of the fees for that entity, if that's what they choose to do. However, they do have to agree that every 5 years they're going to give you a new study.
Every 5 years, they have to give us a new study.
Yeah.
So that should trigger the review that you're talking about of
That's
this.
part of the question. The second part is you read every single year about different districts and say what they spend per student. Yeah, and what do we do to verify that that's actually what they're spending and what they're spending it on? Obviously, cost to, administrators and teachers and all the different things that go into their budget. Is it just based on capital expense?
It's capital only. It's capital only. They have property taxes that are supposed to pay for their operations. It's capital only, and it's supposed to be, and it says in the ordinance, it's growth-related capital improvements.
Right,
And
so-
growth-related as a result of student populations.
I was going to say, more students, bigger building, or addition to a building, or a new school.
Right. And it's not supposed to be as a result of shifts within the school district either. So,
Preaching to the choir.
yeah. And then the other
And
self-adjusting
so the
thing.
library shouldn't see any impact fees then? Because they've got a pretty big building, they're not expanding the building.
Unless there's a huge population influx with customers, I wouldn't think so.
It's, Michael, it's a little more complicated than that. It's not just expanding the building based on the population. There's other elements to it. They can argue that the building has been undersized because of the population. There are other capital elements that can go into this.
Undersized for Naperville, maybe, and not even then. I don't think it's undersized for what our maximum potential is at the library, but okay. So there's a formula involved with it,
There is a formula.
okay? Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Malani?
this is the first time I think I've ever walked into my office and back and picked up the copy of the IML and actually find an article that related directly to the meeting we were having today.
I wish I had
There's
seen it.
there's an article in here about a U.S. Supreme Court case that ruled on impact fees. And I'm not a legal expert by any means, but a couple things stuck out to me. It's referring to Nolan versus California Coastal Commission and Dolan versus the City of Tigard, Oregon. So, and the decisions were made, but the Supreme Court came back and ruled against it. And it describes some things about possibly trickling down to local governments. So if we're looking to reframe our impact fee structure, we might want to do a little research into whatever this is talking about to make sure we're in line with whatever regulations might be coming.
I'm familiar with the cases. We have done the research on it. This will fit in well with what those Supreme Court standards are.
Okay, so this would be more, we're kind of moving more to being in line with this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and it's complicated because you have home rule authority, you got constitutional limitations, and you have statutory authority for certain things. And you have statutory limitations, for example, with road improvement impact fees. So there's a lot there, but certainly those Supreme Court cases that you mentioned and others have been taken into consideration.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you. I can go home now, right?
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Katsinas?
just have a quick question. What do you anticipate, say, in a $500,000 home? How much more will this add to the cost of the permit, roughly? Do you have any calculation on estimates?
Yeah, so that will come up in one of the other cases for tonight, but the goal is to not have the grand total of permit fees and impact fees be like a no net change between what we have now and what is proposed. But that will.
Impact fee will probably drop a little.
My guess is that the impact fee will drop, and then there are some expenses that are being folded into the permit fees. So we'll probably see an increase in the permit fee and a decrease in the impact fee.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to refer this back to the Planning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Compass?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Trustee Reardon?
Aye.
Trustee Rashewski?
Aye.
Mayor Peacock?
Aye.
Application fees and fees per square foot.
I'll entertain a motion to recommend the village board to approve the staff recommended action as presented in the attached memo regarding case number 2024-0294 and direct staff to return with the necessary code amendments at a future meeting date.
So moved.
Second.
So these are the application fees, if you can go through this pretty quickly, but I think the bulk of this is to make this a little bit simpler in how we do it. And I think we looked at it and compared a couple of cases to see what the impact would be, and it's a relatively, not much of a change.
The big one on this one from my perspective is that we're collecting at least some or all of the fee up front at the time of application, as opposed to waiting for them to pick up their permits, which sometimes never happens. They might stop the project. Now is a great time that this is important, as we have hit our 2,000th roof application last Friday. We had a pizza party to celebrate for lunch during our lunch hour. But we're spending a lot of time on these. We are not even sure if these are projects that are ever going to materialize. It could just be people putting in applications, roofers putting in application, anticipating. We're
So
spending.
how many have we approved, roof?
We have gotten in 2,000. We have not approved 2,000.
And where are we at on the approval? This is a separate question, but roughly. How many do we have left? Ballpark.
We're reviewing applications from the 16th or the 19th at this point.
Okay.
Not many came in over the weekend for that one. So it's about 2 weeks is what it's taken us to get through all these. A lot of the applications are not complete, but anyway, so if we're collecting the fees up front, we don't want people putting in applications for things that aren't real. We had this issue with a lot of the solar permits also, that they would be doing these kind of anticipating something. And then the other is just simplifying the way that we do attached and detached single-family homes. The way we have is a combination of counting things in electrical boxes, counting fixtures, counting whatever, and then verifying that what they put there is what they put on their application and feeing it up. We've basically come up with a system that, based off of on a per square foot basis, this is what it's going to be. Now, that is not the livable area. This is, if they've got a basement or a garage, we would include that because these are areas that we're permitting. So based on a cost per square foot. And that will save us a lot of time in getting these things feed up at the end of the process. There's also a escalator put in here for inflation, so that we don't have to go back and look at this every single year. I think we just went through the whole thing. There we go. There's my summary of everything.
Yeah. So I think it's a good idea to pay for it up front because we're going doing all the work. So, it's just like anything else. I mean, it's very frustrating to do all the work when they're just kicking tires. So stop kicking tires. If you're serious, come in. And the permit fees are pretty substantial, so I'm guessing they'll be serious.
Yes.
I'm not sure, do you have the spreadsheets of the comparisons, or have you sent those out in the past? I can't remember. I've seen them.
No. Yeah, we'll put those, he's asking about the price comparisons between what we're looking at now. Were they?
Well, there were, just so the board knows.
We'll have it for the.
There were two or three cases that were looked at. In fact, I asked to look at another case, and some other cases, just to make sure that the way we do it today, the way we're planning on doing it in the future, there's not this big change, and the changes were more minimal.
Yeah. We just wanted to make sure in this case that you're okay conceptually, then we'll go ahead and drop all the amendments and do what we need to do. And so that's what we're asking for right now, is if you're okay with methodology.
Any questions on the methodology?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Malani?
just really quick, I mean, we're basing things off a square foot, but this isn't for every type of permit, is this just?
This is
like
just
a
for
main-
residential, this is new construction, right?
Yes, residential attached.
Residential attached and detached, new construction.
New construction.
Yes.
Thank you.
The other ones get more complicated. So we're starting with this. We're going to try it out. If we like it, then we'll bring the next round to you if we think that's necessary for updating them. We may need some trial by fire here.
Okay. Any other questions? Call the roll.
Trustee Compass?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Trustee Reardon?
Aye.
Trustee Rashevsky?
Aye.
Mayor Pika?
Aye.
Residential permit needs?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Compass.
I move to recommend to the village board to approve the staff recommended action as presented in the attached staff memo regarding case number 2024-0295 and direct staff to return with the necessary code amendments at a future meeting date.
Second.
Any questions or comments? So I'll start off with the goal here is to permit only what we need to permit, inspect only what we need to inspect, sort of reduce our workload, reduce the, residents' need to come in here for permits for everything. So that's the goal of this. And I'll,
Presentation?
so go ahead.
All right, okay. So considering the need for permits, and so we're looking for potential to either eliminate some permit categories or maybe combining them. Next slide. So they kind of fall into two larger categories of state-regulated permits and village-regulated permits. So state-regulated permits, the inspection requirements cannot be altered by another entity, including home rule municipalities. So drain and waste systems require permits. Faucets, toilets, and other fixtures do not require permits. For the state-regulated permits, like plumbing permits, sewer and sump pump, sewer and water heater, they will need permits for them. For example, water heaters, they need proper gas venting, electric connections and materials, and anything that involves gas requires an inspection per state plumbing code, and electrical wiring must be properly installed. So those are some of the reasons why these permits must
So this
remain
is the one
permitted.
the one that jumps out at me, because I think we had 220 of them or something like that, and we've got 20,000 homes, and if you figure a water heater lasts 10 years, that's 2,000 water heaters being replaced. So about 10% of the people are actually getting permits. That's, so that's one, to me, it seems like if only 10% of the people are complying to begin with, why are we jumping through hoops on this? And you're saying it's state required. So one question I have for some of these things that are state required that are, they're replacements. I understand if you're expanding it, making it bigger, adding one, I get all that, or you're changing the type, so I get that. But say I've got a 40-gallon water heater and my water heater failed and I'm getting a 40-gallon water heater replacing it. Is there a way that we can do this in such that certain, if we have licensed plumbers, can they be can they be the inspectors as well? You understand what I'm saying? Where there's some kind of a expedited process where they don't have certain, ones that have gone through our training that we know are licensed, blah, 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 that we don't have to go out and inspect those, because it seems like a lot. And again, most people aren't getting it done anyways.
Well, to answer your question about the licensed plumber installing it, a homeowner can't install their own water heater.
Understood.
So as far as that would help in cost. The other, as far as the state goes, the way the state looks at it is once you touch the potable water system, that does require the licensed plumber or the homeowner's affidavit to do the work. Personally, I just feel that, water heaters are part of the, the plumbing system, and they should be looked at. I don't know as far as any kind of third party. I don't believe homeowners can self-regulate, so.
Well, they do. 1,800 of them a year do.
Yeah.
Self-regulate, and the last time I checked, we hadn't had any houses blow up per water heater. So, I mean, but this goes to the whole plumbing code. There's a lot of things in the plumbing inspecting code that are required because it was lobbied for by a union. And I mean, we do backflow preventions every year now. We have to get it inspected, and it costs us all $100 every year. We have to administer it. That didn't exist, 10 years ago? That didn't exist at all. And we didn't have any problems then either. So, I mean, so some of this is just overburdensome regulation that I understand it's trickled down to us and we have to deal with. I get it.
Mr. Mayor, one of the projects that Development Services is also working on, beyond this is kind of the first blush of this attempt. One of them is a self-certification program. It's going to take a little bit more. They've started on it and they're working on it, but the attempt here is to see exactly what you're saying. Can a licensed plumber self-certify? You know, they'll sign off and then just submit the record. There's a lot of work still to be done on that, but this is really just kind of the first element of it.
Okay.
Okay, and then village-regulated permits, permit and inspection requirements may be altered even when the regulations are based on the International Building Code, International Residential Code, et cetera. So we have three categories, permits that we would recommend no longer requiring. We support the consideration of certain projects and activities starting on page 3 of the memo. All items, however, should be installed by a professional and/or knowledgeable homeowner per manufacturer's instructions. And please note that it's not possible to regulate without a permit. The village code and/or the land development code regulations need to be updated to allow the permits listed to be constructed and installed without permits. So primarily page 3 for those. The alarm system, awnings and sunshades, electrical low voltage, and insulation are the ones that we would recommend to no longer require permits.
Again, this is just for residential uses.
For residential,
We're not
yes.
okaying these for commercial uses at this point. We're just talking about residential.
And then next, reviewed and to be kept. Staff recommends retaining permits to ensure safe design and construction practices such as deck repair, interior demolition only, environmental technology, which is mostly solar projects, furnace and air conditioning replacements, mechanical gas line and ducts, miscellaneous.
Let's stick with page 3 first.
Okay.
It's a deck repair. I'm replacing 3 deck boards. I got to get a permit? It seems like overkill to me.
I would agree. Just to replace 3 deck boards, that would be a repair. Now,
But
if,
according to this deck repair, we need a permit.
maybe that should be rewritten.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, we could probably provide some clarification, what's a repair, and, you know, if it's removal of the entire deck board, all of them, that's probably one thing. That's just to ensure more or less that if they take down the guard system or anything else, that it gets put back up properly and it's the right, at the right height per code. As far as, you know, just repairing a couple of boards, no. That, obviously, that's considered a repair and that should not get a permit.
When we were reviewing all these things, when we talked to the inspectors and other about project creep. So project creep is you put in a permit for such and such, and then 3 other things end up happening when your contractor's there that we don't know about. So we find these things when we go out on what else they've done on their
Well,
property.
I think we have to be able to spell it out so people understand, right? And personally, I think even if someone has a 15 by 15 deck and they're replacing their deck boards, I mean, they shouldn't need a permit to go replace deck boards. I mean, you know, the structure's there already, right? Quite frankly, even with spindles and things like that, I mean, the spindles are there, the heights are change to your existing deck and you're repairing it, you know, then I wouldn't think you need a permit for that. Change the stairs, you change something, then we have to look at it because you got to make sure that that your system is set up so it won't fail.
So the spindle requirements did change in the last 20 years. And then people, when they replaced their railings, they had to bring them up to the new code. So the spacing requirement got tighter, correct?
Yes.
So if you're changing something out, it has to come up to the current code. That was a life safety issue. But I understand what you're
Okay, but
generally
when
saying.
was the code changed?
our last code that we adopted is a 2018. It's on a
You're talking about
three-year
fee
cycle.
schedules?
What?
But when was it changed before that? When did the code change before that?
If memory serves me correct, I think in 2012 it dropped. I think it was 2012 where they had a change in the guard system.
So anything built before 2012, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I would agree that if, they're just declaring that they're replacing the deck boards and not touching the guard system or stairs or anything like that, that would be, I would say, if we, yeah, I mean, that's our concern is that they just start.
I think we need to be clear, and I think we also need to say if you start to touch these other things, or you put gas lines in, or you put electric in, you need the other permits associated with that. So that,
All right, we'll relook at number one. Sorry.
and then, demolition interior for a larger project, what does that constitute, right? So, I think it constitutes any time that you're touching a load-bearing wall, electric, or plumbing, right?
Correct.
So I think we should spell that out, that would be when you need one. If you are not touching your electric, you're not touching your plumbing or moving it, and you're not hitting a load-bearing wall, you don't need a permit.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, I'll give you an example at my house. I have a back bathroom wall that's for a shower that's, 3 feet wide. It's not load-bearing. Goes only up, 2/3 of the way. It has no electric, no plumbing, no nothing. If I were to remove that and put something else in there to keep the shower system intact, I mean, as far as the drain,
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that's not really hampering any of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing
So I
systems.
think we need to be clear about that. I
Okay.
agree with the solar stuff, that makes sense. Furnace and air conditioner replacements, there's another one. Furnace, I understand the gas requirement's a state requirement. Air conditioning, that's not a requirement, and changing an air conditioning line is not particularly, or an air conditioning unit is not particularly,
It's a less complex.
it's not particularly complex, right?
True.
So we have a litmus test for this one coming up on
Right.
the Whirlpool tubs. Basically, our rule is if you could plug it in, you don't need a permit. If it's hardwired, you do need a permit. That's where we're kind of making our break.
Right,
Where we're
that's-
comfortable so that we can check to make sure that it's connected properly.
Right. The big thing with the air conditioner is just to make sure that the right size overcurrent protection matches the unit. And we found over the years, a lot of contractors don't do that. They just, leave the old breaker in, it doesn't match the unit.
Following what Steve just said, if I'm changing my ceiling fan, then I need a permit to change my ceiling fan and replace my ceiling fan because it's hardwired. It's wired to my electrical system. It's not plugged in. If I'm changing my electrical switch, it's not plugged in, it's wired.
Well, to answer that question, those are fairly simple parts of the electrical system.
I understand,
Yeah.
but we have to lay this out so that it's very clear what needs a permit and what doesn't need a permit.
Right. I would agree. I think.
So because there's so many nuances and variations, if people start interpreting things on their own, one way or the other, if they do fall on the wrong side, then they should check it, then we won't know
I get
that's
that,
occurring.
but that's why we have to be very clear, in my opinion, I think the attorney would agree, we got to be very clear to lay it out of this requires it, and here's why it requires it. Okay, and you probably want to put a couple of examples of what doesn't require it, like, hey, you change out your light switch, you don't need it, right?
Yeah, I would agree. That's,
Okay.
clarity is key.
Maybe turn the page.
Okay, now I'm moving on to page 4, and you guys can jump in anytime, by the way, guys.
You're doing a good job.
Would you like me to list them or just have everyone read through?
Well,
and
so if we
take
get
the-
to, gas line makes sense. Again, why would residential minor work need a permit?
I think we're just,
It's, well, I guess we see it as kind of a catch-all permit category.
So if someone doesn't know they apply under that, and then we can tell them whether or not they need a permit or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's
So
that's
then I
kind of
would
our-
list that as for residential, minor work, and miscellaneous residential, contact the village. Rather than laying things out. If it's minor work, contact the village, and then we'll tell you whether you need one or not. And we should know if it doesn't fall in one of these other categories, then you don't need one.
And then we'd also want the list for village staff to refer to, so when someone does call, or have Rick on call to make an interpretation if it's kind of up in the air. The CETA weatherization program does require permits, even though
Okay?
we
Well, then
might not
should-
necessarily.
then we should list
need
that
it, but-
out. Say, this requires a permit.
Yeah, so
Okay.
something that involves grant funding would require a permit.
So, residential outdoor kitchen. So I'm assuming anything that requires mechanical, electrical, plumbing would require one. How about if it's just, how about if it's a freestanding grill inside of a brick,
Brick enclosure,
So like a,
brick container with a
kind of
countertop?
like a unilock or brick.
But there's no gas line, there's no electric, there's no anything.
but they're still building the structure, the brick structure.
Correct.
They're building a brick structure for the countertop.
Well, we would definitely need a zoning permit for lot coverage.
Yeah, that's for lot coverage.
Yeah, I don't know if that would qualify as a kitchen. I think that's more like a fireplace.
If there was a granite countertop and built-in gas, or not gas, built-in grill,
When you say built-in grill, we're talking
I
about
mean,
like a
a
charcoal
built-in grill inside the enclosure, but I mean, it could be a propane grill, right? That they just plug in, they just plug up propane to it, and
No.
not a gas line. So no,
No.
we don't need a permit there.
No.
So I would make sure that you say that anything that requires mechanical, electric, plumbing, gas lines needs a permit. Doesn't require that, then you don't need it. Okay, so here's another one for you there. What if the gas line already exists and it's a plug-in I mean, it's just a coupling? That's fine. So if the gas line if you're not changing the gas line, you're just changing the grill or putting the grill in, because a lot of these things are built and the gas line's already there.
Yeah, that would not need a permit.
Okay.
We would consider that system there, that's kind of almost a plug and play. It would be no difference than an appliance, and we don't
Appliance,
regulate appliances like any white goods or
All right.
anything like that.
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Malani?
So then, to go back to the conversation around water heaters and furnaces being dangerous because we're going to connect a new one in place,
Well,
but I can go outside and hook up a gas line to my grill and call it a day, and that's okay? It's kind of...
Well, the way it's kind of set up, when we look at things like a gas grill and we look at things like white goods, those are appliances. Those are meant to be removed and replaced. So if your dryer goes out, you don't need to get a permit. You just hook it into that gas system. The shutoff is already there. So it's kind of almost foolproof. When you get to a water heater, you have to tie, the right, the hot to the cold water side. You have to put the valve kind of on the right side. You have to have a valve. Some people may not know that. Our biggest concern with a water heater is that there is a temperature pressure relief valve. Comes standard on the units, and that's all fine and good. Our concern would be if somebody ever took one of those off and plugged it, that would become basically a missile. It would be a vessel under pressure.
Sure, no, that makes sense.
So, and that's kind of the way we view that. So grills, anything like that, those are what we would consider an appliance, a white good that could be just swapped in and out.
Okay.
Okay. So moving on to sheds, that makes sense because we want to make sure it's in the right spot. So I get that. Siding, gutters, and fascia. The way this reads, it's only in Old Orland that it's needed? Is that correct?
They need to get a certificate of appropriateness in Old Orland because we regulate specific materials in that district.
Yeah, in Old Orland. What about the rest of Orland? It seemed that you would need a gutter permit if you're changing the gutter system. What if you're just replacing your gutters with in the same place in the
question with building code, in our amendments, we require that water has to be shut away from a structure. And the way we do that is with a roof. So when your roof, obviously, water comes off of it, gutter downspout will shut it away from your foundation and building. So that's where that comes into play. Our hope would be that, it would be great if people, if they had damaged gutters, would replace them. We just want to make sure that they do replace them and that, there's not going to be any kind of water problem in the future for that home, so.
I'm going back to the way this reads, it's basically saying it's kind of needed for the old Orland. Is it needed everywhere?
Well, I think the drain, where it drains, we need to look at so we don't end up flooding out the
I
neighborhood.
get that for gutters. I'm not so sure for siding and fascia that we really care. It's kind of an HOA thing as far as color and all of that.
Well, siding is also related to our brick requirement as well. So if someone decides they want to, put vinyl siding all over the entire side of their house, that it's a stop measure to keep
So I
them
go
from
back
doing
to replacement versus, so I'm thinking about the H streets, if they're not brick, they weren't required to be brick then, they're not required to be brick now. So if it's a replacement of siding, so what you're saying is you don't need a permit as long as you're not altering how much siding you have.
Correct. I guess from an enforcement standpoint, if we allow some people to say you have to get them and others not, then it's our job then to look for the ones that didn't, as opposed to just saying, oh, siding is being replaced. So there's going to be, I think, the potential for more on the enforcement side for people that have already broken the rule, but we wouldn't have known that because they wouldn't have applied for the permit. So when we were going through a lot of these, we were kind of thinking about the other side of that, which is the enforcement side, and what it's going to take to make sure that decisions that, okay, well, my neighbor did it, so I obviously don't have to do it. Without even considering these things, they may not even look at what the rule is. And then we won't even know it until after it's potentially happened.
Okay, so you're saying this applies to all, I'm okay, I think, if it applies to everything. I also think it's something that for siding and gutters could have somebody who's self-certified, because it's, as long as they're not changing the amount of siding on a house. Because then obviously you're out of code with our code, so. This goes to say with all of these things that aren't permitted, it's still ultimately the homeowner's responsibility to remain within our codes, right? So, even if it's not listed as you need a permit, you still can't, you can't get rid of your brick on your front.
Yeah, I guess it's a lot easier to stop something before it happens than to rip it out after it does. So we see this with a lot of backyards, who over the years we find out have done work without a permit and have covered most of their yard with pavements
Right,
and pools.
but don't we, and I'm going to ask the attorney this, don't we have coverage with the fact, like for the backyards? You're not allowed to block a drain, you can put plants in a drainage easement, you're not allowed to block the flow with a structure.
Yes,
If you block the flow with a structure, we can have you remove it,
that's true, we can.
whether you got a permit or not. Is that not correct?
No, that's a true statement.
Right, so, I'm just trying to balance, what do we need to go check, so, that's all. Okay. So I would, for this, I would make sure you say all houses need it, but Old Orland also needs a certificate of appropriateness.
Okay,
Category. It looks like A and B are part of it.
okay, yeah.
So waterproofing and damp proofing, need permits for exterior work and interior drain tiles. I think what you really mean is we need work for exterior work on the foundation, on the building that touches the building, and interior drain tiles. But exterior drain tiles do not need, except for sump pumps, correct? Do not need permits.
Yeah, I would agree. As far as on the exterior where you're putting in a drain tile system, that is where it is required.
What's that?
On the exterior of the building, the drain tile.
Foundation.
So that is required.
So we do require a permit, because we didn't used to require a permit for drain tile, for exterior drain tile. We didn't require any permit for drain tile. And all we needed was an inspection for tying into the storm sewer. for exterior drain tile. We need it for interior drain tile, and you need it for waterproofing and damp proofing because you're exposing the foundation and you're doing that. But for the actual taking drain tile, connecting it to a gutter and routing it somewhere, we didn't need a permit, but you can't go underneath the sidewalk, you can't go within 10 feet of a sidewalk, 10 feet of your property line. That was code. We didn't need a permit for that.
Right, the only reason for the permit for that is to ensure that they're staying the 10 feet away, to be quite honest with you.
I think
Right,
these are covered under number 6 and 7 on the next page, I think.
Right, well, I thought in the other ones it said it wasn't needed. So that's where we're getting at there is, do we want to be out there inspecting every drain tile that's put in? And getting a permit for every drain tile? I don't think you do. I do think, and then we hold the homeowner accountable if they're releasing it and it's creating an ice dam, we make them pull it back to 10 feet, we cite them and we make them pull it back. And then, if they're going into the storm structure, we want an inspection to make sure that they've closed the hole. And I can tell you back in 2005 or 6, we said, the village said, do not put it into the storm structure. And it was several years of discussions like, well, okay, we're not putting it in the storm structure, but we're bringing it right to the storm structure, leaving it right next to it. Does that really make any sense, or do we want to just punch it in? And then they eventually changed and said, yeah, let's just punch it in. You just have to call Public Works, we'll come out and we'll inspect it. I don't know what the inspection process is now, but that's what the inspection process was.
And that's the whole thing is about the tie-in, is just to make sure it's done properly.
So I would put in there, if you're tying in to our system, then you need an inspection. Joel, I saw you nod your head. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
We just want to where they tie it in too, because if they tie it really low, it's going to back right into their house. So.
Right. I mean, if they release it in their yard, do we care? If they release it in the wrong spot in their yard, it's going to be self-correcting, right? And I'm not so sure the village wants to be in the business of saying, put it here, because then when you put it here and it releases into your house, now we're liable. Would you agree with that, the attorney? Yeah. I don't think we want that liability.
So this would be more or less complaint-driven. I mean,
It would be complaint-driven, but you need to follow the code, not go within 10 feet of the sidewalk, not go within 10 feet of your property, within the property line, and, follow you need to follow the drainage so that you're not creating water issues for your neighbors. And if you're punching it into a storm sewer, which we encourage, you need to get an inspection. And hell, we could even have just a simple inspection fee for that instead of a big permit, right? Whatever the inspection is for Public Works to go out there and inspect it, $25 or whatever. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now we're at clarifications of certain types of permits.
Okay, so awnings and sunshades, although generally we support not requiring a permit, and anything with an overhang greater than 30 inches does require an inspection of the support structure.
I would agree with that.
Demolition of an accessory structure, we kind of touched on this earlier. Sheds without utilities and less than 200 square feet in area might not need a permit. However, sheds with utilities and/or a floor area of 200 square feet or greater should continue to require a demolition permit to make sure everything's disconnected correctly, et cetera.
Okay.
As long as this is number 3 on page 5, is not combined with any other project or permit. Lot coverage does need to be considered. Stephen mentioned project creep earlier, where someone might get a permit for a 10 by 10, and then all of a sudden it becomes a 20 by 20, and then they don't call for a final inspection.
So this is to make sure that with all the MWRD and lot coverage issues.
Yeah. We've not infrequently, someone frames it with pre-pour, and then we go out there, and then as soon as we leave, they move the frame, they pour it, and then they never call us for the final.
Yep, got it. Makes sense. Sidewalk makes sense.
And then a hot tub and spa, there's also, This also is like, maybe built into the ground versus plug and play. So plug and play does not need a permit. However, anything with a water depth of 24 inches or greater is considered a swimming pool and a potential safety hazard. So need to think about the improvements around something like a pool. So drowning can occur without fencing or other barrier. An electrical permit would be required if an electrical permit is required.
So you need
Yeah.
a hot tub and a spa so if I'm running my 220 electric out there, I need an electrical permit to do that. If, however, I built my house, I put the 220 in, I put the 220 there, it's there, and then 8 years later, I go get the hot tub because I planned for it, that would be considered plug and play because I'm just connecting it to the 220 that I already have.
Right, we'd still.
Yeah.
Not running electric.
Right, if you're not running electric and you're just physically plugging it in, you would
Well,
not need a
as
permit.
you know, hot tubs don't physically plug in, you actually connect, but it's the same connection as your ceiling fan. You're just connecting wires.
We would still need to verify that all the safety stuff is in place and.
What's that?
I'm sorry, we still need to clarify that all the safety stuff is in place, like there's fencing or whatever, the making sure people don't drown. I'm also thinking about some of the sides to go put one on their deck that's on their raised ranch or something that's up in the air, that there's some load bearing. I mean, water's pretty heavy.
So what are we permitting here? We permitting location?
No, it would be back to the electrical hookup. That is the main concern.
Right, but if I already have the electrical run there and all I'm doing is connecting the electrical, is it any different than changing out a light switch? Because it really isn't. A different wire.
Yeah, but that would be hard to track.
So this is.
Houses aren't required to have electrical supplies for hot tubs specifically, where in the building code, it is required to say, let's have.
But
a
if I
GL.
put in my hot tub electric when I built my house, the village has inspected that electric.
Then I guess the person would have to prove to us that it's there, or give us something where we could check on it and see that that truly does exist. Because the building code itself doesn't require you to do that. That's an option when they build the building, to be honest. As far as the code goes, it doesn't say you have to have, provisions for electrical for a future hot tub.
Okay, now what if I'm replacing my hot tub?
Well, we
I would
can.
say a replacement, we've already identified they have electric. We've already identified that it can be in that location because it's there. It's not going to break through the wood, right? So replacement would seem to me that you don't need to get
Right.
inspection.
I would, if the electric's there and, and we would write it in our ordinances and we would have it posted as such, then fine.
You're not changing your electric and you're not changing your gas. And most of our electric, they're not running gas to it, but in the event that they are. If you're not changing those two things, and it's in the same location, I would think that a replacement would not need it.
That's probably true.
So I think we need to note that. We already talked about drain tile, right?
Yes.
Residential remodel repair, now you're getting into the real
Yeah.
weeds here. I mean, I don't need to, if I'm replacing a sink or a cabinet, I don't need to do it. So what we're saying here, I think, is if we're altering our plumbing or altering our electric, then you need, it's not if you're altering fixtures,
Correct.
right?
Right.
If you're altering.
You
your
can change
plumbing
the
and electric.
faucet.
I'll give you an example, so you can answer my example. So again, I'll go back to my shower, okay? In the future, I want to expand my shower 3 feet, okay? It's a non-load bearing wall. All I'm doing is putting tile up. That's all I'm doing, okay? And changing the floor. I'm not moving the drain. I'm not moving any plumbing, nothing. No electric, no nothing. Do I need a permit?
Well, technically, right now you do.
Okay,
But-
should I need a permit for that?
Excuse me?
Should I need a permit for that?
Ooh, well,
It's a pretty minor change.
I would agree if it's not a load-bearing wall and you're just changing tile and, I think that would be fine.
Okay, so now, but then if I decide to add another fixture to my plumbing so that I have a bath bar and a shower head as my real estate person suggests, then I would need an inspection, correct?
Well,
Or then I would need a permit, right?
Not for the bath bar, and not if you're just replacing, let's say, the shower head. If you're adding a new shower head,
If I'm adding a bath bar. I'm adding a bath bar and I've got an existing shower head.
a bath bar being a grab bar,
No,
No,
a
no,
body
no.
bar.
A body bar to shower,
Body bar.
It's an extra fixture.
another fixture.
yeah, right, if you're adding an extra fixture where you have to open the wall and physically touch the piping, then yes, that would.
Okay, so I think we need to make this clear that if we're changing the electric, we're changing the plumbing, we're changing the mechanicals in any way, or we're touching a load-bearing wall, then we need to get a permit. But if we're not doing those things, i.e. we're changing the countertops and the cabinets, you do not need.
Correct.
And you can even move your cabinets, doesn't matter, as long as you're not changing your electric or or your gas or your plumbing.
That's true.
correct?
That is correct.
I think
So
that makes
even-
it clear.
Yep.
Everybody agree with that? Everybody's just letting me go on a roll here.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
All right,
Mr. Chairman.
go ahead.
So I had a list. You hit most of them so far. So that's why, and I know Dove Services gets a little bit anxious whenever I start talking. So I've kind of held back from that a little bit today. But, thinking through this, I mean, we're hearing a lot on like-for-like fixture replacements without changing structural, electrical, gas, plumbing. I think the one, we have a lot of logs on piled up already, but the one I'll add then to this would be like garbage disposal, replacement of garbage disposal. It's directly within the plumbing system. Would that require permit under?
Hope not.
Well, technically, I would consider that as an appliance. Now, if it does not exist and you're installing a new garbage disposal where you do need to have the electric, then you would need the permit for that. The big problem with most of these things are that if they're not installed per code, they're fairly easy to do. A good example is, let's say you have a dishwasher, okay? In Illinois, it has to go to what we call the wide tail piece. It can't just directly flow into or tap into the system, and you have to do this. Now, that's the Illinois State Plumbing Code. In other parts of the country, you don't have to do that, to be honest with you. But in Illinois, you do. So the only way to regulate it is for them to get a permit. So now, let's
That
just
would be
say.
considered an appliance if we were replacing a dishwasher.
Yeah, see, that's the whole thing. I would say if it's there and you're just replacing what's there, fine, we would consider that as appliance. I mean, I would agree with that. My problem is I'm kind of bound by the code. And in Illinois, it's
I
kind of
understand, but the
states.
garbage disposal is a real one, and the garbage disposal is not that hard to swap out, but there are directly connected wires, just like your light switch. So, that's what I'm saying. So garbage
Yeah.
disposal to me,
I wish there
if
were
we're
easier
permitting garbage
answers.
disposals, we are doing things really wrong here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, a disposal, electric being there, I mean, here, if it's exactly plug and
It's
play.
new, it's different, because now you're changing the electrical system.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think, as part of the challenge here too is going to be the language at the code is not going to be the great answer to that. So, one of the thoughts that's running through my mind right now, and I'm looking over at IT, if I can catch his attention, is something along the lines of like a rules engine. Is there something that we can put people through a process whereby it asks them questions and each question leads them down the right path, right? Does this
Like a
exist?
choose your own
Do we have to do
adventure.
this? Essentially, yeah, going back to when we were kids, the choose your own adventure books. But I mean, that's something that's pretty straightforward and as far as something we could possibly do with the website. I'd want to look at something like that rather than giving people the wall of text, right, and having them sort through it. And I realize that it's probably going to be very complex, but you can tell just by the conversation that we're having here, and I've been in the code deep. So, and it's still tough for me sometimes to get through it all. So, that's just a suggestion I'd like, staff to look into as far as.
It
how
all
do we
go,
walk
it all
people
goes
through
back, and I'm gonna bring it back to the water heater, okay? We've already established that changing out a garbage disposal, changing out a dishwasher, changing out a stove, it's an appliance. Well, water heater's the same damn thing. I've got connections. It's the same thing if I'm changing it out. I already have electric run there, I already have gas run there, and I'm connecting it the same way that it was connected before. Now, if I change the size of it, then that's a different animal. But,
Well, I disagree. The way I would view that is that a water heater is a piece of equipment. So is a furnace and an air conditioner. That's considered more equipment. The others are considered more appliance.
so if we're gonna say that, then what we should say is appliances where you're not making changes to electric or to gas or to plumbing do not require a permit except for AC, heater, and water heater.
Okay.
That would be how you would explain that.
I have a suggestion. Maybe we should list everything that doesn't require the permit.
Well, that doesn't require, that's gonna be really challenging. It's much easier to identify what does.
Okay. Just a thought.
Because there's a lot of appliances that people have that I don't think we want to get into that. But, so I think that's what you're saying. Isn't that what we're saying here? Is that everything else is considered plug and play except for AC, one water heater and a heater?
Yeah, I would consider those pieces of equipment, and those aren't plug and play. I consider,
Well, then there's gas grills. Right.
Gas grill's an appliance. We've established that. Wouldn't your dryer is an appliance?
Right.
Your water heat, your stove is an appliance.
correct. But a furnace is not. A furnace is a piece of equipment.
That's
It's
what I'm saying.
stationary.
If we're saying that we think that furnaces, and we have good reasons, and maybe we do, I'm not saying we don't, then I just identify that anything that doesn't change your electric system, doesn't change your plumbing system, doesn't change your gas system, is considered an appliance except for AC, heater, and water heater. Is that, everything else, you don't need a permit for.
I understand. See where we're going with, okay.
I guess heat pump would be right in there. So anything HVAC related or water heater. How's that? That way that covers heat pumps. Does that make sense and understandable? Everybody understand that? It's hard to hear silence, so.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. All right, we're on retaining wall 3 feet and under. A general permit is not required.
However, it could change drainage patterns if.
Right. So I think if
Built
we're going
on
to say
spot.
it's not required, we should say it's not required, but your drainage patterns need to remain the same. And then we should say that any wall going into an easement, because they're not necessarily permanent, so I get that. Any wall in an easement requires a permit. That's really simple.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Malani.
we had issues in the past where we needed to make sure that retaining walls did not enter an easement. So
Well, that's my point. It should,
we can't issue for a permit to enter the easement, so.
well, there's certain easements you can put a retaining wall in, there's certain easements you cannot.
Which ones are those? Because we had a very long discussion about that and had to go out to a resident's house and argue with them for quite some time to get them to move their entire retaining wall into their yard and not into the easement.
Well, if there's an access easement, for example, and it's small, and it just depends on what it is,
Right,
what
yeah,
the
this
easement's for.
particular situation was.
A utility easement, for example, you can have a retaining wall as long as you mark the utilities.
Yeah, this was a drainage easement with land that was probably never going to be built on behind the house, and we still made them move it.
Right, well, drainage easement, you're impeding the flow. So that's a problem.
And it was between like 2 feet. was the-
Yeah, well, drainage easements, you can impede the flow, so that's why we don't allow it. So again, you don't need a permit unless you're going into an easement, in which case, maybe most of the time, we're gonna tell them, no, you need to move it somewhere else. But now you've covered yourself, because if they put it in the easement, you can tell them to take it down. That work? Okay. We talked about that. Apparently, this is in here twice, so I didn't cut.
Well,
letters
this
and
is the
patient.
group where we wanted to have the discussion.
So,
about
right.
There's a lot of
Tree
alternatives.
removal. Obviously, parkway trees, you need to contact us.
Yes.
conservation and preservation easements, I get that. They can't go on somebody else's property to remove a tree anyway, so they shouldn't need, it's not a permit, you can't do it, because it's not yours. What trees would be on a site with an approved landscape plan? How would how would a homeowner know if they have an approved landscape plan?
Most non-single-family detached developments have landscaping plans that are approved by the village board that are supposed to be complied with. Sometimes single-family detached ones have some landscaping, like if there's landscaping burbs or perimeter landscaping, that might be part of the development that we're not supposed to touch. So, and that's just making sure that they stay compliant with the approved landscaping plan, which is something that, because that is an approval that people might buy in reliance of when they're purchasing their house, that certain landscaping might be there around in the neighborhood, that those need to be complied with. So in general, someone who has a tree on their own lot, that's fine.
So I would highlight to people what is likely to be an approved landscape plan, so they know. Number one, heritage trees greater than 24 inches diameter, I'm okay with that. But the other thing is what about dead trees? So if somebody's got a dead tree, are we going to require a permit for a dead tree? Most towns don't require that, by the way. Most towns don't require, on your own property, don't require
Yeah,
removal permit.
not on their own property, we don't, but we
Right.
recommend they get rid of it, obviously, because it's a hazard.
Well, we
to-
might require it even. So I think on people's own property, it really, if it's not a conservation or tree preservation on their own property, and there's very few of those in town.
Yeah.
If
This
it's a
is just a
heritage
list of-
tree,
I'm sorry.
if it's a heritage tree on their own property, are those even required to keep? I don't recall any ordinances in Orland that requires us to keep a heritage tree. So if it's on their own property, they don't need a permit.
I have to double check on that,
Yeah.
on that particular.
I don't think we
point.
have a heritage tree for people on their own properties.
Like
I
a
don't think
single
we
family.
have that.
Most of the heritage trees would be if there was in a park setting or something like that, then we monitor those.
Right, but in some towns like Palos Park, if you're removing an oak tree, you need to go get a permit.
Right.
If you're touching an oak. In Orland Park, I don't believe we have any of those kinds of ordinances. Maybe the attorney might know, since he's been around longer than me.
Not that I know of.
I know on commercial property, have had multiple cases where there have been very large fines for removing heritage trees, so let me
But they would have a
double-check.
landscape plan.
Potentially. Let me check on that.
So let's just look into that, because I think on someone's own property, they don't need it. They should really probably never need a permit to remove a dead tree that's on their own property. But they shouldn't be touching any trees that aren't on their property.
Oh, you mean a dead heritage tree?
Just a dead tree, period.
Oh, no, we're not talking about dead trees. We're talking about, yeah.
I understand, but heritage trees, I don't think we have a heritage tree ordinance in Orland Park.
Okay, we'll get the answer for that.
Mr. Mayor?
And saying we do? When was that put in?
Looks like 2017.
That answers 2017, with the heritage tree ordinance.
All right, and then we need to list what those heritage trees are.
Yes.
And that does not include dead trees.
No, heritage tree is only a healthy tree. So
Healthy trees.
anything dead isn't included in it.
Okay, but we need to spell that out for people. So we're not running in here to get a permit for a dead tree.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Katsinas.
I would like to see a fine added when trees are removed in a conservation easement. I don't know that we have that. We do have conservation easements, happen to live on one, and I would like to see some sort of fine on a per-tree basis, because to your point before, Steve, after the fact, how are you going to see what's there and you're going out and counting stumps? So I would hope that there's a significant fine per tree, whether you consider it a non-heritage tree or not.
I think,
We have fines, I know that.
yeah,
We have fines, and they are significant.
And how long do we have to enact them after they cut down the trees?
Trustee Castellanos, we'll get you the answer to that. So-
Perfect, thank you.
So windows and doors, says must meet energy code requirements. Does that mean we need a permit or don't need a permit?
So as long as it meets the opening of, you're not expanding the opening and changing the structure, you should not need a permit. However, Old Orland will require at least a certificate of
So
appropriateness.
I would
Yeah.
spell that out. As long as it's the
Yeah.
same opening, it's a replacement, you don't need it except for Old Orland, certificate of appropriateness. So,
Yeah.
anybody else, we've just gone through them all. Anybody else have anything to add? So these are the kind of the changes to come back with. So I would move to table this and just bring back the changes to us.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Compass?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Trustee Reardon?
Aye.
Trustee Rashevsky?
Aye.
Mayor Pica?
Aye. And, this was an important discussion, because I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make us more efficient, make it clear for the homeowners and residents what need permits, put less burden on our staff for stuff that's silly to be permitting, and less burden on inspections and all of that. So this is, just trying to make things more efficient and, less, the appropriate amount of government oversight.
2024 Neighborhood Road Improvement Program Amendment Number 1.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Compass.
move to recommend to the village board to approve the proposal for amendment number 1 to 2024 Neighborhood Road Improvement Program with Lindahl Brothers, Inc. of Bensonville, Illinois, in the amount not to exceed $300,000 for a new not to exceed contract amount of $5,083,450.22 for fiscal year 2024.
Second.
Any comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Compass?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Reardon?
Aye.
Trustee Rashevsky?
Aye.
Mayor Pica?
Aye.
Non-scheduled citizens and visitors for public comment on items relevant to village business.
Any other people to comment? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Compass.
I move to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Compass?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Trustee Reardon?
Aye.
Trustee Rashevsky?
Aye.
Mayor Pica?
Aye. We're adjourned. We will start the next meeting at 7:25, so give you 7 or 8 minutes to take care of business.